Hello everyone! Welcome back to another episode of Entertainment with Buford and Francis. Today we'll be sort of cosplaying, but at least mostly dressing similarly to Buford Van Stom from Phineas and Ferb. I'll be telling the story of The Incredibles. Enjoy the video. Superhero Bob Parr, also known as Mr. Incredible, who is preparing for his wedding with Helen Trucks, also known as Elastigirl, stops a civilian's attempt suicide by tackling them through a skyscraper window. Bob discovers supervillain Bon Voyage robbing the building, but is interrupted by Buddy Pine, a devoted fanboy who wants to be Bob's sidekick. Bob refuses, and Bon Voyage clips the bomb onto Buddy's cape. Bob manages to get the bomb off, but it destroys part of an L train track, forcing him to abruptly stop an oncoming train. After his wedding with Helen, Bob is sued for collateral damage with the suicidal civilian and the injured train passengers. Similar lawsuits create a negative public attitude towards superheroes, so the government initiates the superhero relocation program, banning all supers from using their powers in public and forcing them into hiding. 15 years later, Bob and Helen raised 3 children, Violet, Dash, and Jack-Jack, in the suburbs of Metroville. Since Bob and Helen have superpowers, Violet and Dash also have innate superpowers, Violet being able to create force fields and turn invisible, and Dash able to run at a very fast speed, but the baby Jack-Jack has not yet to show any. Bob, stuck in a white-collar job at an insurance agency, secretly helping those denied coverage, first seen helping an elderly woman by directing her to a better insurance agency, though is berated unfairly daily by his boss, Mr. Huff, misses his former days as Mr. Incredible, and sneaks out on Wednesday nights with his super friend, Lucius Best, aka Frozone, having the ability to freeze the moisture in the air to fight street crime. One day, Bob loses his temper with Mr. Huff, who refuses to let him foil a mugging and hurls him through 5 walls and into a locker, exposing his super strength and losing his job as a result. Returning home whilst trying to figure out what to tell Helen, he finds a message from a woman named Mirage, who asks for Mr. Incredible's help to stop a Rouge robot on a distant island for an incredible reward. Bob, claiming that he's going on a business trip to Helen, takes up Mirage's offer and travels to the island of Nomanism in a jet with Mirage. She explains to him that the robot is called an Omnidroid, a top-secret prototype battle robot able to solve any problem it is confronted with. The only unfortunate problem with its intelligence reached a point where it wondered why it was taking orders, and now it is wreaking havoc in the dense jungle. Bob is then airdropped into Nomanism, explores around, and then encounters the Omnidroid. After a fight, Bob emerges victorious by tricking it into ripping out its own proper source. On his return to Metroville, Bob spends his days working out, improving his family relationships with Helen and the kids, and getting back into shape. He takes his super suit, torn in the battle with the Omnidroid, to Edna Mode, the fashion designer to the supers, and asks her to repair it. She does so, and also insists on creating a new, better super suit for him. She refuses his request to add a cape, though highlighting how the accessory doomed several other supers in the past by getting caught on a variety of things, such as the fin of a missile, a jet turbine, and a vortex. Mirage soon contacts Bob with another job on the island. On arriving, he finds an upgraded Omnidroid who starts to attack him. While trapped by the robot, he meets its creator, the technology-savvy supervillain Syndrome, who Bob recognizes him as Buddy. Syndrome eventually wants to vow revenge for the entire supers, and he brags about how he has won. Bob throws a log at him. Syndrome dodges the log and immobilizes Bob with his 0-point energy ray. After using the 0-point energy ray to throw Mr. Incredible around in order to show his power over the superhero, Syndrome accidentally throws him over a waterfall and into a river. Syndrome sends a bomb to kill Mr. Incredible and sends a probe to ensure that Mr. Incredible has been killed. Bob manages to avoid the explosion and, discovering the bones of former super and friends Gazer Beam, fake his death by hiding from the probe behind them. In the process, he discovers that Geezer Beam used his powers to inscribe a dying message into the cable. Kronos! Determined to discover Syndrome's plan, Bob breaks it back into his facilities, finds a computer, and using Kronos as the password, discovers a plan to systematically eliminate supers. Each super thus far away was pitted against increasingly advanced models of Omnidroid, and if not terminated by one model, they would be terminated by the next or by Syndrome himself. He also discovers that although Frozone's location is known, Helen is not. As he browses the database further, he discovers that Operation Kronos' final stage to unleash an Omnidroid on Metroville via rocket deployment. Meanwhile, Helen has become suspicious of Bob having an affair. After discovering Bob's repaired suit, she talks to Edna and learns she created suits for the entire Parr family, each outfit with a tracking device. Helen triggers Bob's, identifying the remote island but inadvertently revealing Bob's presence to Syndrome and causing him to be captured. Helen borrows a private jet from an old friend and travels to the island, disappointed to learn that Violet and Dash have stowed away while leaving Jack at home with a babysitter. As they get near the island, Syndrome gives an order to terminate them by hitting the plane with missiles. Helen uses her superpower to save her children from the exploding jet, and they safely make it ashore. Helen, Violet, and Dash take shelter during that night in a cave, and Helen, after giving them masks to protect their identity and making them promise to use their powers if threatened, runs off to Syndrome's lair. She sneaks in and after creeping around, one point being that she found a massive rocket, rescues Mr. Incredible from his cell. Violet and Dash, meanwhile, then find out that the cave they're in is in fact an exhaust tunnel for the rocket launch and have to spend the night in the jungle. The next morning, they encounter a talking bird, which is in fact a robotic alarm. This attracts the attention of the guards, and they pursue them on a high-speed velocipods. Violet and Dash manage to defeat all of them, combining Violet's powerful force field with Dash's super speed. They soon reunite with their parents. The family works together to face off against and defeat several guards chasing Dash and Violet. They are soon captured by Syndrome, who immobilizes Bob and Helen with one 0-point energy ray and simultaneously immobilizes Violet and Dash with another. Syndrome sees that the family is wearing matching supersuits and then surprised to find that Bob had married to Helen and had kids with her, remarking that he had hit the jackpot by capturing a whole family of supers. Upon imprisoning the whole family in his containment unit in order to keep them from interfering with his plan, Syndrome explains that he has launched the perfect Omnidroid to Metroville, which has sent the city into chaos, upon which he will appear and, using a control band, subdue the robot and become the city's hero. Then, once Syndrome has become an old retiree, he plans to sell his advanced inventions to everybody, making them super and thereby making them obsolete. He departs in his aircraft to stop the Omnidroid. After his departure, Violet discovers that her force field can sever her magnetic bonds and freeze the rest of the family, and with Mirage's help, they board a second rocket bound for the city. In Metroville, the Omnidroid has started a path of destruction, and Syndrome enacts his plan, first saving a woman and her baby from a petrol tanker tossed by the Omnidroid, then faking a punch while pressing a button to detach one of the robot's arms, much to the people's cheers. However, the Omnidroid is still a learning robot, identifies where the external control source is, observes the control band and fires it off Syndrome's arm, then shoots at Syndrome's inbuilt rocket boosters, sending the villain flying into a building and knocking him unconscious while the robot continues to wreck the city. The Incredibles arrive in the city, and after a crash landing, Bob goes to stop the city alone, but his family helps as they are in this together. Soon, Helen and Bob fight them together, and Frozone, who starts seeing the ensuing attack, work together to destroy it. The robot attempts to flatten Violet and Dash, but Bob just manages to save them, though he is thrown into a building afterward. He then charges back and tackles the Omnidroid, with Frozone helping as well. He then finds Syndrome's wristband, realizing that it controls the robot, and, after being clawed in by the robot but being released upon pressing a random button, throws it to Dash, who races to get it with the Omnidroid firing at him and trapping him amongst burning cars. Helen slingshots a manhole cover and destroys the laser, while Frozone rescues Dash. The robot then vaults itself into the air and nearly crushes Frozen and Dash, but he manages to freeze the air around them and cushions their fall. The remote is then knocked away. Bob runs to get it, only to be trapped in the Omnidroid's fired pincer. Violet then recovers it while invisible. After much confusion, Bob soon realizes from remembering his battle with the first robot that the only thing that can penetrate it is itself. He directs Helen to use the right controls and releases the powered-up pincer, which surges through and comes out of the Omnidroid with its power source, falls mundanely into the river, and explodes, which causes the city to welcome the Incredibles and Frozone as heroes. As they are driven back to their home, Helen anxiously calls the babysitter and learns that something bad is happening. Arriving at home, Syndrome, having regained consciousness, immobilizes the Incredibles with his 0-point energy ray, explaining that he plans on kidnapping Jack Jack and raising him as his sidekick out of revenge for Mr. Incredible ruining his plans. As Bob and Helen launch a rescue attempt, Jack Jack reveals his powers of transformation, forcing Syndrome to drop him into Helen's waiting arms. Bob hurls his sports car at Syndrome, causing him to fall in the aircraft turbine, where his cape gets caught in the engine. Killing him, they ruined plane crashes into the Parr's home, but Violet is able to protect the family from harm. 3 months later, the Parrs have readjusted to normal life, but when a new villain, the Underminer, appears, the Incredibles, including Jack Jack, don their masks and suit up, ready to battle the new foe.